Jesus is kind of saying, hey, you guys are in over your head. You don't have all the answers. You're striking out on the boat. You're doing what you know, but it's not bringing any of the fruit that you know it should be bringing. There's not the right product. You're putting out all the resources, but there's no product. There's no return on it. And what Jesus does, and I really love this, is when I was reading this, I'm like, cast the net on the right side of the boat. What does that mean? We get so caught up in left side living that we never notice that there's another side. If I'm just living in discouragement and I'm living in depression and I'm living in anxiety and I'm living in fear and I'm living in panic and I'm living in rejection and I'm living in my failures and I'm living in all these just questions, the abyss of what's the point? Well, what about the right side? What about the other side? What about the other side to it all? You get so busy trying to make the left side work that you've got a left and a right brain. You've got a natural life and you've got a spiritual life. You've got the way you see it and you've got the way God sees it. You've got the way you've convinced yourself to believe it, and you've got a faith life on the other side. There's another side to it all. And what happens with our lives is this. We get so conditioned to doing things one way, one side, all the time. It's a conditioned response. Somebody comes at you, you get an anxious thought, you get something coming in your mind, you have a thought about, I'm going to go forward for God, and then you get crushed with condemnation right away. What's the point? I'm such a failure. I can't follow him until I take care of this, and I'm never going to be good enough, and yada, yada, yada. And it's like my conditioned response has always taken me to the left side. This is something I have no power of. This is something I have no control over. This is just the way it is. That is just a conditioned response. I respond by fear because I trained my body how to do that. You want a little treat, FIFO? You want a little treat, Charlie? Then you sit. Oh, good dog, you sat. I'll give you a treat. And that's how we train our brain. We're responding to something the same way over and over again, and what it's called is a conditioned response. My anxiety is a conditioned response. I'm not trying to get rid of it all. I'm trying to turn the dial down. My anxiety, though, and the way I go, the story I tell myself is crazy. But listen, it came to my heart this week that if it's a conditioned response, and the story is just something that I made up because I'm so used to going to it. I'm so used to going to the left side. And every time I go, I come up with nothing. It's always empty. If I go through it one more time, everything will come out different. It never comes out different. And what I recognized and realized in my life, that if it's a conditioned response, then it can be changed. You might be over your head, but it's still in your hands. Like, we want to put it on God all the time, and I get that, but sometimes it's just Jason loves the allurement of what my anxiety does for me. Jason loves to talk to his fear. Because it's comfortable. I know my responses. I know how it's all going to go. It doesn't demand faith of me. It lets me be rejected. It lets me throw in the towel. It lets me give up hope. It lets me mope. It takes me down. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It just is an unwinding. But you have so many conditioned responses in your life that are just that. And what Jesus says is, hey, what about the right side? What about looking at this situation like you're in an ocean and not in a kiddie pool? What about listening to my voice? What about responding to what I'm doing? And what I'm trying to do from this day forward is become a right side fisher. I'm trying to be a both side of the boat guy. If I'm always just here, I'm never going to see everything that God has here. And here is where the bounty is, and here is where the blessing is. You can change because it's in you. And even if you don't change, God still loves you. And even if you can't change, God still loves you. And even if you won't change, God still loves you. God is still here, even though he's hidden. He is present. He cares about you. He's not like you better change or else. God has blessing upon blessing in your life, and we have to condition ourselves to do right side fishing, which is responding in our life that in a way that is completely unconventional to what we have conditioned ourselves to. If I have talked myself into doubt, I have to start to learn to go to faith. If I'm living in hate, I've got to go to love. If I'm living in despair, I've got to dive down deep into hope. And look at this in John chapter 21 and verse number 7. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter as they're in the boat, "It is the Lord." And when he reveals himself to you in this life, you don't have somebody else's story. You now have your story. You now have the way that God has worked in your heart, and you don't have to forfeit that or fabricate it. You can live in the reality of it, that this is where I was, this is what I was doing, this is how my life was going, and God revealed himself to me, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was the Lord. And this is the rock that we are building upon. It's the rock of our faith. It's a revelation of Jesus giving to the human heart. And to me, my life is just so full of all these times when it was like, there's no point, it's never gonna, it is the Lord. And then go back, it is the Lord, and in over your head. But the Lord is revealing himself to you time and time and time again. This is how you grow when it becomes real. But it only becomes real when you're responsive. When you take what is there. When you go forward in what is given. And don't you love this? It said when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work. He had his Speedo on. And threw himself into the sea. I'm going in over my head. Talked to you guys a lot about my anxiety, right? I can have the anxiety story and the God story. And as long as I'm just feeding that anxiety story, it's like my heart is in the pool, but my head is on the diving board still. And I'm not diving into all God has for me. I'm not going all in because I'm letting my anxiety determine the story, how it ends, and how it goes. And what I want more than anything is as the Lord reveals himself to my heart, and I continue to see that he's much better than religion. He's much better than things I thought early on in my life. He's much more beautiful. He's got much more in store. He's a good and loving God. What Peter did is he said, I'm not going to sit in the boat where my head is running the show. I'm throwing myself into this. And it takes that kind of reckless abandonment to live a life of faith when all our anxiety and our fears are screaming at us. And yet the Lord is speaking to us and revealing himself to us. And I want in my life to live in a way where I don't get caught in my head, but I'm in over my head in the sea of faith.